Welcome again to another edition of On the Call. I'm Jeff Rimmer, and joining us today is, how about this? The second best winning percentage coach in National Hockey League history. Most recently, the coach of the Minnesota Wild. We welcome a great friend and an outstanding coach in Bruce Boudreau. Bruce, first of all, first and foremost, how's the health? How's the family? And how are you handling these times? Awfully strange, to say the least.
Well, first of all, thanks for that nice introduction. My family's great. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary yesterday. My son had his 22nd birthday, so we had a little dinner over at the house. But as far as health goes, I'm good. I mean, when I got fired, it seemed like an appropriate time once the pandemic hit to get a knee replacement that I needed for about the last 3 or 4 years. So I got it done, and 6 weeks later, it's normal, and I feel great.
Now, the situation for you, you've coached in Washington, you've coached in Anaheim, and again, as we mentioned, the Minnesota Wild. First of all, let's deal with the Wild situation. It had to catch you by surprise because for me, I saw the Wild coming on and playing some pretty good hockey.
Well, I was unfortunately, I was pretty shocked. Usually, whether you're coach or whomever, you can see it coming. This sort of blindsided me pretty well, and I had no idea it was coming in. And yeah, we were playing well. I think from the 7th game on of the season, we were in the top 10 in teams playing, and we had won. I mean, we were 7-3-1 in the previous 11 games when it happened. So, but you know what? Every GM has their right, and ownership has their right to hire and fire. So, I mean, I knew what I was getting into when I got into this business. So, I mean, and there's an awful lot of decisions that have been made in the last 40 years that I've been around that you shake your head at, but things just happen. So my wife is great. She just said, okay, what's our next adventure? And we're now looking for our next adventure.
Now, for you, it's got to be a little unnerving because in your 2 previous stops after being dismissed, you had a new job within days, if not hours.
Yeah, I mean, the timing was different too, though. Don't forget, Jeff. I mean, the other time was Thanksgiving in Washington and was at the end of the year in Anaheim. This is in February, where I think the surprise is it was pretty late as far as firing coaches goes. I mean, I know it's been done before. I mean, Lou did it and they won the cup, but so I didn't think I was going to get another job at that point from the February 14th on. You can just do your research and hopefully something pops up where you get the opportunity to do it in the next year.
Now, I assume that with the play-in games and the resumption of the season and the Stanley Cup playoffs, we've seen you've done some television work in the past. I'm sure you'd like to do some more.
Well, I want to stay involved and stay visible in the game, and I always find that as fun. I mean, it's not really work because you're just doing what comes natural, and that's analyzing games. So it would be fun to be able to do that if somebody gives me an opportunity. If they don't mind the odd slip up with the words, because sometimes now I can get every now and again I can get ahead of myself. But I'm going to be doing it at home. May as well do it in front of in television. So it'd be a lot of fun. So, but we'll see how that goes as well.
Well, we'll get you to do some of the forecasting for us here as well. But first, hey, you've got a great face for television. And hey, you're a movie star. Let's talk about your time in that great flick that I've got to pull out from time to time, Slapshot. Yeah, you even had a part in there with Paul Newman. I thought you were going to get the lead.
Yeah, not quite. But, that's 45 years ago. And who would have thought, like in 1976 or whenever the movie was made, so, that it would last us that long, but it's an iconic movie. And when you did it, you were having some fun doing it, but you didn't realize that at this point in time, everybody that ever has watched hockey or is a hockey fan has seen the movie.
Now,
So it was fun doing it. I'd never realized how you do a Hollywood movie. Got to meet Paul Newman, George Roy Hill, and some other actors, and we had an awful lot of fun together in a short period of time.
I bet. Before we get to the playoffs, one more word about coaching in the National Hockey League. And there have been a number of coaching changes this year. In fact, Lindy Ruff has just been hired here by the New Jersey Devils, and he will take over for Nazardine, Tom Fitzgerald. Of course, the association those two had with the Florida Panthers in the late 90s. We were there, and that was quite a relationship the two had, and they're now reunited with the Devils. But as I said, a lot of coaching changes this past year. And that comes after the previous season. There were very few coaching changes. You talked earlier about ownership, and general managers certainly have the wherewithal to make changes. But with now the game where it's at and so much dependent on winning, I expect to see there'll be a lot more coaching changes here moving forward.
Well, you know what? Whether we like it or not, it seems like there always is. And whether it's hockey or not so much during the season in other sports, but I mean, hockey, for whatever reason, seems to pull the trigger a little quicker. Football and baseball, they wait till after the season ends for the most part. But, you know, I mean, I don't wish anybody to lose their job. I mean, but if you know it's going to happen, and if it happens, I certainly would like to be in line to be able to get it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see these upcoming Stanley Cup playoffs because, quite frankly, if some teams that are expected to go a long way are suddenly sidelined early, I would certainly suspect there'll be some soul searching in that regard as well. But let's talk about the playoffs. And first of all, the qualifying round. Your former team, the Minnesota Wild, will start with the Western Conference. They'll take on the Vancouver Canucks. How do you see that series?
You know what? I've analyzed it in my head a lot of times, and I think it's going to be a very close series. I mean, every game we played Vancouver was close. I mean, they work hard, and them when they're healthy and they're feeling it, they're a really good team. If they get the good goaltending, they'll be tough. But they match up really well. I mean, I think they may have you know, a star in Pettersson, but I think if Kevin Fiala keeps playing the way he was playing at the end, then that sort of equals out. And then their top four lines. I look at the fourth line a lot of times and to see where the strength is there. And if you have a good fourth line, to me, you got good balance all over. And I think both teams, if you look at the fourth line of Koivu, Hartman, and Ryan Donato, and then the fourth line of Vancouver is Beagle, Sutter, and Roussel. I think you look at it's pretty, they can manage each other pretty well. So I think that equals out. I think where the advantage is going to be in the end is going to be the Minnesota defense. I think is really good, and they're mobile. They're always in the top five in scoring. I mean, even though you don't notice it, like with points, not in goals necessarily, but I mean, and at the end, the last 25 games, the last 13 games with me, and the last 12 games without Matt Dumba has started to become Matt Dumba. He missed almost the whole year before, and when he's on, it really makes the game a lot easier for guys like Spurgeon and Suter and Brodin. And now they've got Susie, who's a really good up-and-comer, and I think will really help the team. So I think the advantage there goes to Minnesota. And then in goal, it's sort of a toss-up. I mean, Dubnyk had a terrible year, and Stalock has come on. But, you know, with this time off, maybe Doobie's gotten it back. Like, I mean, he had a lot on his mind during the course of the year with his wife being sick and everything. Now that she's recovered, he's going to want to fight for that number one spot. And in Vancouver, if Markstrom's healthy, he was, you know, up for maybe even the Vezina this year. So he's hopefully for Vancouver, he's the real deal. And on paper, it would look like they have a little bit of advantage in goal because Minnesota's sort of unknown right now.
Now, overall in that Western Conference, there are a lot of hockey people that we've talked to here over the last few weeks, and they think that the Edmonton Oilers could go a long way. Do you prescribe to that theory?
You know what? Who am I to guess? But I don't really see it. They have three outstanding players up front if you include Nugent Hopkins. But I think it takes more to win. I mean, they certainly are going to be emotionally involved in the game and stuff. And they should beat Chicago, but I never count out Chicago. I mean, I've played against them way too many times, and if Crawford gets hot, he's as good as any goaltender in the league. And that Patrick Kane, he's does some amazing stuff when you'd least expect it. And we forget these are 3 out of 5 series. I mean, man, you blink and you could be down 2-0, and that's a tough road to hoe when that happens. So I mean, but in the West in general, I find it pretty open. I don't see any team dominating, even St. Louis. I mean, they're a really good team and they're Stanley Cup champions, but when you play them, they don't put the fear of God into you.
What about in the East? And let's start with the Columbus series. The Blue Jackets are going to be taking on Toronto. You talk about firepower. The Maple Leafs certainly have that.
Well, I tell you what, that's an interesting series. I've followed it in my being a Toronto an awful lot. And well, I love the way Torts coaches. As a matter of fact, I try to put myself and coach an awful lot like him system-wise. When I've gone over tapes, we do things almost identical in the systems. And the one thing I see about that series is if Toronto is going to be an up and down, let's go after them type team, I think they're in a little bit of trouble because Tampa just finished doing it, or they did it. Columbus did it to Tampa. You clog up the neutral zone. You don't allow them to skate. You don't allow them to make the long passes. Teams get frustrated. You keep dumping it in and forechecking. Boy, it's a tough way to play against that kind of team. So it's going to be an interesting series. I'm really looking forward to that one, quite frankly. And to think that 2 teams of that caliber are in play-in situations is pretty crazy.
Who's the team to beat in the East?
Well, I mean, on paper, I mean, the regular season, you'd have to say Boston. But you got to look at one point Tampa's going to break through with their talent. And if they learned by their mistakes of the previous year, then I think I think they'll be a tough team to beat. But at the same time, if they lose the first game of their playoffs and they start saying, oh, here we go again, it puts a lot of pressure on you. It's a tough thing to recover from. So, but I mean, I think there's the East has so many good teams. It's really hard to pick. Like, I mean, you go from Columbus, the 3 play-in teams. I mean, Pittsburgh, Columbus, and Toronto could win it. And now that everybody's healthy, boy, you're going to see some interesting hockey. I mean, because a lot of times you go into the playoffs and you're banged up, but you're healthy, but you're tired. Everybody should be pretty refreshed going in, and the energy that they're going to be showing is going to be quite intense. I'm really excited about watching it.
I am as well. We've talked about your coaching career. You've also had a pretty interesting playing career, and a lengthy one at that. In fact, in your NHL days, including with those Toronto Maple Leafs, you had the second best point percentage in NHL history. People don't talk about Bruce Boudreau in that regard, but you were also a bit of a free spirit. And along those lines, let's talk about your playing career and the way you approached the game back in those days.
Well, you know what? It's funny. It was a different era, different time. And everything when I was younger that I did, I'm not bragging, but everything turned to gold. Never lost. We won every championship from midget to juvenile, then to junior B, then 2 Memorial Cup championships, and everything, we touched. And I, was a avid baseball player, and we won, Ontario championship. So I just thought everything was going to continue. So, I mean, what I didn't realize is you have to keep working hard for it to continue. And I didn't. I was not a very good guy when it came to getting in the gym. I just thought you could put your skates on and it would happen. And I learned the lesson the hard way. I mean, I love to have fun, but and I didn't train hard enough. And it was probably, well, I didn't realize until I was about 27 or 28 and sitting in the minors. I mean, you could lead the league by 20 points. It didn't matter. I mean, you're still in the minors. And then it dawned on me that maybe I have to work harder. And at that age, I was too late. You're no longer a young prospect. They're looking for guys that are 21, 22. And when you're 27, 28, they say you've had your chance and now it's time to look for somebody else. And that was me as a player in a nutshell. Even though I loved playing and I played for a long time, I wish I had learned that work ethic off the ice and taken care of myself when I was 19, 20, and 21 rather than a little later in life.
There's nothing wrong, though, with having a little bit of character and being somewhat of a free spirit. In fact, I've had several conversations over the years with John Tortorella, who really relishes the fact that we don't have those personalities in the game. He said, I'd like that. I'd like a player to challenge me. I'd like the guy to be a bit of a free spirit. You feel the same way?
You know what? I don't have a problem with questions, with people coming up and asking questions, because it makes me a better coach, too, if they're right. Like, I think hockey players are smart. I mean, in my era growing up, you weren't allowed to talk to the coach. You know, I mean, you just had to, you keep all your ideas to yourself. But I mean, in this era now, I talk to a lot of the players and ask them what their thoughts are, because sometimes what they see on the ice is different from what I see on the ice, and they may be right. And I'm not proud enough to sit there and be stubborn and say, hey, just because I said it, this is the way we're doing it. If something works that they're doing and they believe in it as an individual, then I certainly want to give them the opportunity to let it happen.
Before I let you go, you've got to be proud of your sons. They're in hockey here now, and let's talk about the boys. And hey, you're not bragging, because they both have certainly had an impact on the game.
You know what? It's great. I think it's always makes a parent proud when their kids want to follow in their footsteps. My son Ben is now coaching in the East Coast League. He's coaching in Fort Wayne. So I mean, and he's doing really well. And he's started a lot younger than I did. My son Andy is coaching at the Banff Hockey Academy in Alberta, and he runs skills schools all over the place. My youngest son, who just turned 22, is an assistant coach with a junior team here in Minnesota. And so, I mean, we're a complete hockey family, and I think it's great. I hope they have. I've given them the highs and lows of the job, but I mean, they want to continue doing it, so I'm there to support them any way I can.
Didn't you start in Fort Wayne as well, and now your son following your footsteps?
I think that's pretty cool that I started in Fort Wayne, and my son started in Fort Wayne, and it's you know, he had a good first year as a head coach, so it's I just hope. I told him, I've always warned him, I got fired my second year, so I won the coach of the year in the first year, got fired in the second year. So don't rest on your laurels. You got to keep going.
Who's the best player you ever coached in the National Hockey League?
You know, that's a great question. The most talented has to be Ovechkin. He's, you know, as dynamic a scorer as you're ever going to find anywhere. I always thought Nicky Backstrom could be an elite thinker. Ryan Getzlaf was tremendous, you know, in everything he did. I again, really lucky. In Minnesota, there was no superstars, but there's a lot of good young players, or good players too, and but none that I think rise to the status of the three guys that I just mentioned previously. So I mean, but you get blessed when you coach these guys, and you get a chance to hobnob with other stars like a Wayne Gretzky and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Bruce, you've had an outstanding career as a player, as a coach, and another chapter I guarantee you, is forthcoming here in the not too distant future, and well deserved, I might add.
Well, Jeff, I appreciate it. I hope you're right. But like I said, when you've been in the minors for the first 33 years, basically, of your life, you take nothing for granted. The only thing you can do is work really hard and hope you get the opportunity to prove yourself all over again. That's what I'm looking forward to doing.
Well, I really appreciate the visit, and I look forward to talking again here down the road.
And I'm looking forward to that series most of all. I mean, I think it's going to be crazy now that Columbus is healthy and you know what they can do. I mean, I think they wish Josh Anderson was back, but the rest of the group, boy, they worked their butt off, and they're going to be a tough team to beat.
Again, thanks, Bruce, and we'll talk to you here down the road.
Sounds great, Jeff. Take care.
Bruce Boudreau, who, of course, is certainly a fascinating name in the game of the National Hockey League. And that does it for this week's edition of On the Call with Jeff Rimmer, presented by Byers. We'll join you again next week, and we have a very special guest. We're going to go from Bruce Boudreau to, are you ready for this? Michael Bublé. Join us next week.